President, Government Bill, first reading. Appropriation Bill 2018. Second reading, Financial Secretary. President, honourable members and fellow citizens, I move that the Appropriation Bill 2018 be read a second time. At the start of Chinese New Year, I deliver the first budget of the current term government with a thankful heart. Over the past few weeks, the public has engaged in extensive discussions and expressed diverse opinions on the budget. I'm indebted to you all and appreciate fully that various sectors of the community have different needs and aspirations. The preparation of this year's budget has enlightened me in many ways. Budget consultation has revealed once again the wide-ranging, diverse, and even conflicting demands within the community. At the same time, it has brought me closer to the public, enabling me to see things from the perspective of the people whom I serve, so that I could consider how best to use the resources pooled from them to meet their needs and those of Hong Kong. Therefore, in preparing the speech, I place much emphasis on explaining in a more systematic way the government's priorities in using public resources, as well as our vision for the future, development direction, and financial planning. The initiatives put forward in this budget are underpinned by three main objectives. One, diversify economy. We have to diversify our economy to create wealth for Hong Kong and provide wider and better development opportunities for our young people. Two, investing for the future. The outbreak of the winter influenza has reminded us once again of the pressing need to improve healthcare services. An aging population poses challenges which need to be overcome by deploying resources and making early preparation. And we also need to improve our living environment to make Hong Kong an ideal smart city to work and live in. Three, caring and sharing. Children and young people should be given more care, protection, and opportunities. Middle-class families need relief from financial burdens, while the grassroots and underprivileged require more support. Besides, a fulfilling life calls for not only materialistic improvements, but also better quality of life and spiritual enrichment. In reality, no abundance of resources would ever enable the government to satisfy the needs of all. It is my responsibility to take care of various sectors of the community while addressing the pressing needs. I must also be proactive, innovative, and bold in investing for the future of Hong Kong. I will elaborate on this in the ensuing parts of my speech. Economic development. The gross domestic product (GDP) per capita of Hong Kong amounts to $46,000 and is amongst the highest in the world. However, our annual average economic growth rate for the past decade was merely 2.7%, reflecting a slower growth momentum. We must leverage our strengths and take a forward-looking approach in positioning our future development and seeking new impetus. This will enable our economies to grow in a diversified manner, provide our young people with more room for development, and improve people's quality of life. In view of the global economic landscape, we need to keep abreast of three major trends and ride on them. First, the unstoppable wave of innovation and technology, I&T, has swept through the world, fundamentally changing the global economic structure and the way we live and consume. The application and omnipresence of the communication technology, artificial intelligence, and big data have not only spurred the birth of many new industries that operate across industries, sectors, and geographical areas, as well as the emergence of the sharing economy, but also revolutionized the traditional and capital-intensive business model based on tangible assets. They have generated keen competition with opportunities for transformation. New technology facilitate business startup and foster new ideas, innovative products and services that generate economic benefits. This explains why major economies over the world all strive to develop I&T and regard it as a new driver of economic growth. To stay ahead of the game, we must enhance our I&T environment, attract companies from new economic sectors, and research institutions to set up their presence in Hong Kong and nurture talent for a knowledge-based economy. Second, the shift in global economic gravity from west to east is now established. Over the past 5 years, China has contributed over 30% to the global economic growth, and, together with other developing regions in Asia, has made up a share of almost 60%. In the foreseeable future, the developing regions in Asia will continue to drive the global economy. Since the reform and opening up of our country 4 decades ago, China's economy grew by about 9.5% per annum in real terms on average, and has risen to a $12 trillion economy last year. Its per capita GDP also increased from just about $200 in 1978 to over $8,000 today. The future directions and strategies of our country's economic development have a major global bearing. They are also the linchpin of Hong Kong's sustained prosperity. Third, since the outbreak of the global financial crisis in 2008, there have been incessant protests against free trade and calls for deglobalization in some advanced economies. Protectionism is also on the rise. The multilateral trade system advocated by the World Trade Organization over the past few decades have encountered enormous challenges. More economies have turned to regional or bilateral trade negotiations for promoting and maintaining their trading activities. While safeguarding multilateral trade, Hong Kong must also strive to conclude more regional and bilateral trade agreements. In response to the 3 major trends just mentioned, Hong Kong needs to consolidate and build on its existing strengths, rise with the tide, and seize the opportunities before us. In the dedicated chapter on Hong Kong Macau in the 13th Five-Year Plan, our country indicates support for Hong Kong to leverage its unique advantages, reinforce and enhance its status as an international financial, transportation and trade center, and strengthen Hong Kong's status as a global hub for the offshore renminbi business and our role as an international asset management center, and move various services up the value chain. It also expresses support for Hong Kong in developing the I&T industry and establishing itself as a center for international legal and dispute resolution services in the Asia-Pacific region. As stated in the report to the 19th CPC National Congress, the national economy has been transforming from a phase of rapid growth to high-quality development, and China will continue to forge ahead with consumption upgrading and the supply-side structural reform. The report also proposed to pursue the Belt and Road Initiative as a priority and give equal emphasis to bringing in and going global, with a view to boosting two-way investment and trade flows between China and other countries, thus making new ground for opening up on all fronts. Moreover, the report also advocated the implementation of a coordinated regional development strategy, including the development of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Bay area. On the other hand, the report pointed out the importance of forestalling and resolving major risks, especially the financial risk. The direction and strategies of China's economic development have created enormous opportunities for Hong Kong. Take the financial services industry as an example. With the unique advantage of one country, two systems, Hong Kong has become the premier listing and fundraising platform for mainland enterprises and the global center for offshore renminbi business. We have been contributing to our country's financial reforms and renminbi internationalization in a risk control manner. We've also played an unparalleled role in connecting the mainland and the international markets and investors, and achieved significant development in the process. Looking ahead, our financial services industry will have ample room for more diversified development. We will map out a development blueprint for it. Hong Kong's trade volume is 4 times its gross economic volume, and free trade is the cornerstone of our economy. We've all along been fostering economic development by expanding the boundaries and scale of our market. In the face of rising trade protectionism and anti-globalization sentiments, the Belt and Road Initiative and the Bay Area development serve to enlarge the hinterland for business development of our enterprises and expand our market coverage. The Belt and Road Initiative spans from east to west, covering both land and sea routes. By effectively improving the flow of people, goods, and capital through facilities, connectivity, and policy coordination, the initiative will generate great demand for infrastructure, capital, as well as professional, legal, and other high-end services over which Hong Kong has advantages. Supporting the Belt and Road development and assisting mainland enterprises in growing global will open up new room for the development of our enterprises, as well as financial and professional services. The Bay Area development is of strategic significance to Hong Kong in three key aspects, namely two markets, I&T industries, and land resources. With a population of 68 million and GDP amounting to $1,400 billion US dollars, the Bay Area is an enormous market for our financial and high-end services industry. Furthermore, as Hong Kong is the most cosmopolitan city offering the best professional services in the region, our enterprises and those in the mainland may join forces in tapping new markets. The Bay Area covers not only Shenzhen, which houses many leading I&T enterprises, but also a large number of cities transforming towards an advanced manufacturing economy. As such, the Bay Area and Hong Kong can complement each other in the field of I&T industries, thereby creating an international innovation and technology hub where talent, research and development, institutes and enterprises cluster. The Bay Area has abundant room for development as well as rich land resources. Upon the completion and commissioning of the various transport infrastructure projects, travel within the Bay Area will be very convenient. With policy breakthroughs, it will offer more convenience to Hong Kong people who operate business, study, work and live in the Bay Area. To seize the opportunities, we must look squarely into the problem of land and manpower, which have been hindering the economic and social development of Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been plagued by land shortage for years. The problem not only affects people's livelihood, but also restrains our growth potential. We must proactively address this problem with firm resolve. The task force of land supply established last year is striving to forge a consensus in the community on this issue. Furthermore, a shortage of workforce and talent has also impeded the economic development and competitiveness of Hong Kong. The latest unemployment rate of below 3% reflects a tight labor market in Hong Kong. With a rapidly aging population, our workforce will fall from its peak in the coming few years. On the premise that local workers' priority for employment will be safeguarded, we should consider increasing imported labor in a timely manner and on an appropriate scale to address the specific needs of individual sectors. The Commission for the Planning of Human Resources, led by the Chief Secretary for Administration, will commence operation shortly, fostering collaboration across bureaus in various sectors. The Commission will examine and coordinate existing policies and measures from a macro perspective. In parallel, the government will continue to invest in education, training, and retraining to enhance the quality and competitiveness of our workforce. In order to cater for the development needs of various sectors and industries, we will also enhance our talent admission arrangements to attract talent from outside Hong Kong. The Labour and Welfare Bureau is finalizing the talent list, which is scheduled for completion in mid-2018. The land and manpower problems in Hong Kong cannot be resolved with financial resources alone. We should not shy away from the different voices in the community. Instead, in the spirit of seeking common grounds while shelving major differences, we should build consensus in a pragmatic and rational manner and join hands to overcome constraints. While there are vast opportunities for Hong Kong's development, they do not knock twice or wait for anyone. We have to stay united and seize each and every opportunity. So what should the government's role be? Our free and highly efficient market has won worldwide acclaim. Under normal circumstances, the market is the most efficient mechanism to allocate resources. One should therefore respect market forces when formulating economic policies. That said, with the upsurge of I&T, and fierce competition between economies. The current government will examine Hong Kong's competitiveness, our economy, as well as current state and direction for development of our industries from a forward-looking and strategic perspective. Playing the role as a facilitator and a promoter, we will introduce timely and appropriate measures to support industries which will have strength and development potentials and tap new markets. We also review regulatory and tax requirements to remove red tape and create a business-friendly environment. Our various initiatives in promoting R&D and financial development are some examples. The government will focus in particular on removing land and manpower constraints. At the same time, we maintain a simple and competitive tax regime, as well as a transparent and efficient regulatory system, while encouraging investment and innovation. Under the present macro environment in which opportunities abound, I am confident that we can find more drivers for growth to support the development of our society. Now let me review our economic performance over the past year. Throughout 2017, the global economic landscape continued to improve. The economies of US, Eurozone, and Japan recovered further, with a synchronized acceleration of growth. The mainland economy, sustaining strong growth momentum at 6.9%, boosted regional trade flows in Asia. Hong Kong's export of goods registered appreciable growth of 5.9% in real terms. Export of services also returned to a steady growth of 3.5% in real terms. Domestic demand remained particularly resilient. Full employment, coupled with the positive wealth effect, drove strong consumer confidence. Last year, private consumption expenditure grew by 5.4% in real terms, the fastest since 2011. Investment expenditure also increased by 4.2% in real terms for the year. Overall, due to the better-than-expected outturn in the external environment, Hong Kong's economy grew by 3.8% last year, higher than the forecast in last year's budget, and the average trend growth rate of 2.9% over the decade from 2007 to 2016. In a state of full employment, the labor market further tightened in the latter half of the year. The latest unemployment rate dropped to a 20-year low of 2.9%. Strong economic growth spurred a gradual increase in employment during the year, with broad-based improvement in wages and earnings in real terms. The headline inflation rate for 2017 was 1.5%, as inflationary pressure remained moderate. Netting out the effects of government's one-off measures, the underlying inflation rate was 1.7% in 2017, the sixth consecutive year of easing. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic. The global economy remains on an upward trend, with a synchronized upturn in major economies. The International Monetary Fund lately forecasts that the global economic growth this year should reach 3.9%, the fastest since 2011. Yet, we need to remain alert to changes in the global monetary environment and geopolitical situations, as well as policy risks of major economies. The performance of the U.S. economy last year exceeded expectation, with unemployment rate falling below the levels before the financial tsunami. As the U.S. implemented a tax reform at the end of last year, we need to continue monitoring its potential impact on the U.S. and global economy, as well as the capital flows worldwide. The pace of monetary policy normalization of the Federal Reserve is another major factor affecting the global economic and monetary environment this year. The recovery momentum in the Eurozone becomes more entrenched as the unemployment rate continues to fall. The policy move by the European Central Bank following its tapering of monthly asset purchases early this year and the progress of Brexit negotiations deserve attention. In the mainland, as it deepens the supply-side structural reform to promote economic upgrading and transformation and continues to prevent and control financial risks, It is expected to maintain a medium-high rate of economic growth and remains the main engine of global economic growth this year. All in all, the prevailing external environment is promising. The expected gradual pickup in demand from major economies will lead to considerable growth in Asia exports. Hong Kong's export of goods should be able to grow steadily. If the recovery of tourism in recent months can be sustained, Hong Kong's retail sector will also see a more vibrant performance. Our favorable employment and income conditions will spur consumption growth in Hong Kong this year. Sanguine local economic sentiment and positive business confidence should also sustain investment growth. In the light of the global and local economic situations at this juncture, I forecast economic growth of 3 to 4% for Hong Kong this year. On inflation, local cost pressures will go up somewhat amid sustained economic growth. Imported inflation will also edge up alongside the global economic upturn, but such pressure is unlikely to be high. Overall, inflation will remain moderate this year. For 2018 as a whole, I forecast that the headline inflation rate will be 2.2%, with an underlying inflation rate at 2.5%. Since the start of this year, the expectation of U.S. interest rates adjustment has triggered substantial fluctuation in the global financial markets. I urge all investors to stay vigilant. As always, the government is committed to ensuring an orderly and steady operation of our financial system. Over the past few years, with a tight supply of residential flats, ultra-low interest rates, and an influx of capital, property prices have soared beyond the affordability of ordinary citizens. However, I believe that the key factors underpinning soaring property prices over the past few years are gradually undergoing fundamental changes. First, the supply of residential flats will increase. The private sector will, on average, produce about 20,800 residential units annually in the coming 5 years from 2018 to 2022, an increase of 50% over the annual average in the past 5 years. Besides, as at the end of this December 2017, the projected supply from the first-hand private residential property market in the next 3 to 4 years will remain at a high level of approximately 97,000 units. We anticipate that the tight supply situation in the property market will ease. Besides, as the U.S. interest rate normalization process continues, the ultra-low interest rate environment of the past few years will no longer persist. The changes in these key factors will put pressure on the property market. The government will keep a close watch over changes in the property market before making a home purchase decision. The public should carefully assess the risk involved, especially the impact of interest rate hikes on their ability to repay. Let me now turn to public finances. The Chief Executive has put forward a new fiscal philosophy for the current term government. It envisages that on the premise of ensuring the health of our public finance, the government should adopt forward-looking and strategic financial planning principles in optimizing the use of surplus to invest for Hong Kong and relieve our people's burdens. I agree entirely with her view. In formulating fiscal policies, we should strive to be innovative, responding to community aspirations promptly and effectively, and making a head start to foster long-term development. In preparing this year's budget, I've ensured that adequate resources are provided to implement the various policy initiatives put forth in the policy address. I've also adopted the following strategies. A. Proactively promoting economic development by providing favorable conditions for emerging industries such as I&T and identifying growth opportunities on the one hand and strengthening the competitiveness of the pillar industries on the other, so that our economy will prosper in a sustained and diversified manner, creating quality jobs for our young people. B. Make bold investments to break through the development bottlenecks. The budget will optimize the use of surplus to build capacity in terms of land and human capital. C. Improving the existing services and quality of life. D. Preparing to meet the community's long-term needs for health care and elderly care. E. while maintaining the competitiveness of our tax regime, making suitable adjustments to ease the burden on taxpayers and enterprises, having regard to our prevailing fiscal position. F. Caring for and sharing with the community by enhancing support for disadvantaged and enabling members of the public to enjoy the fruits of our economic success. And G. Maintaining adequate fiscal reserves. I now turn to three issues on public finances which were frequently raised during the consultation exercise. First, annual surplus. It is expected that the government would have an estimated surplus of $138 billion in 2017-18, as pointed out in my budget last year. When considering how our annual surplus is to be deployed, I will carefully take into account the source and nature of the surplus and make optimal allocation of resources in the light of external and local economic development, social needs, and public expectations. This year, I'll follow the same principle by sharing with the community about 40% of the projected annual surplus and using the remaining for improving services and investing in the future.
Second, beyond fiscal reserve. We have a healthy fiscal surplus, but as a small and highly open economy, Hong Kong is susceptible to changes in the external economic environment. The linked exchange rate leaves us limited room to adjust our monetary policy. Therefore, healthy public finances are vital for Hong Kong as they enable us not only to accelerate our development and expand our capacity when the economy is stable, but also to introduce counter-cyclical measures promptly and effectively in times of economic downturn, thereby stabilizing the economy and safeguarding people's livelihood. As we all know, Hong Kong has a narrow tax base and our revenue sources are concentrated. In 2017-18, property tax, salary tax, stamp duties, and land premium account for about 74% of total government revenue. Among them, land premium and stamp duties fluctuate the most, and they account for 27% and 15% of our total revenue, respectively. Fiscal surplus in recent years were attributable mainly to the buoyancy of asset markets. However, experience shows that asset markets can be highly volatile, and any downturn will put our revenue and fiscal position under pressure. When considering the allocation of resources, I often remind myself to take a more forward-looking perspective. To better care for people in need, the government has implemented measures proactively for elderly care and support for the disadvantaged over the past few years. In the face of rapidly aging population and fierce competition from other economies, we need to enhance our economic structure, strengthen healthcare and elderly services, nurture talent, increase land supply and housing, improve labor welfare, and build a caring and just society. These are significant commitments. Moreover, the budget is prepared on a cash basis and mainly reflects the projected cash receipts and disbursements of a new financial year, with forecasts for the following 4 years. It does not fully reflect our liabilities and committed expenditure, such as the outstanding commitment of over $350 billion for ongoing works projects. Besides, the financial implications for policy initiatives may not be fully reflected in the budget of the new financial year because of the lead time required for implementation. Third, relationship between public expenditure and GDP. In the past, it was a budgetary criterion that public expenditure should be kept at or below 20% of GDP. One of the considerations was to avoid overexpansion of the government, which may not be conducive to resource deployment. Today, while acknowledging the forces and the roles of the market, we have to be more proactive in managing public finances in the face of various development needs of society and the economy. During the period between 2018-19 budget and the subsequent years in the medium range forecast, the public expenditure will be slightly higher than 21% of our GDP. but I will ensure that the increase in public expenditure is necessary to meet the actual needs of Hong Kong and broadly in line with our affordability in the long run. And next, the revised estimates for 2017-18. The 2017-18 revised estimate on government revenue is $612.4 billion, 20.6% or $104.7 billion higher than the original estimate. This is mainly due to much higher than expected revenues from land premium and stamp duties. The revenue arising from the sale of several residential and commercial sites in the urban area and a sharp increase in the number of land exchange agreements concluded with developers. Land premium increases by $62.6 billion to $163.6 billion, or 62% higher than the original estimate. As a result of heated trading in both property and stock markets last year, the revenue arising from stamp duties would be $39.7 billion, or 75% higher than estimated, reaching $92.7 billion. As for government expenditure, I forecast a revised estimate of $474.4 billion, 3.5% or $17 billion lower than the original estimate. This is mainly because the expenditure on certain initiatives such as old age living allowance and the low-income working family allowance were lower than the original estimate. For 2017-18, I forecast a surplus of $138 billion. Fiscal reserve are expected to reach $1,092 billion by 31st of March 2018, while the housing reserve will reach $78.8 billion. Next, we'll turn to the budget measures for 2018-19. Economic development increases income and enables us to improve people's livelihood and drive for society progress. INT is undoubtedly an economic driver in the new era. To shine in the fierce INT race amidst the keen competition, Hong Kong must optimize its resources by focusing on developing in areas of strength, namely biotechnology, artificial intelligence, smart city, and financial technologies, and forge ahead according to the 8 directions set out by the Chief Executive. In order to achieve results, our targeted effort must be underpinned by adequate resources. In last year's budget, I reserved $10 billion to supporting INT development. This year, I will set aside an additional $50 billion. Of this, $20 billion will be used on the first phase of the Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation Technology Park in the Lok Ma Chau Loop for inter alia, site formation, infrastructure, superstructure, and initial operation. Given the scale of development, it is estimated that the whole project will eventually cost far more than $20 billion. When the relevant planning studies were finished, we will make reference to the findings and provide additional resources in a timely manner so that the park can come into operation as early as possible. Besides, we will inject $10 billion into the Innovation and Technology Fund. The ITF's financial support for the INT development in Hong Kong has increased from about $1,700 million in 2013-14 to $1.5 billion to 2017-18. It anticipates demand for funds will continue to increase. As our fiscal position is strong this year, I believe the funding injection is opportune. The ITF will continue to apply R&D work in Hong Kong with the additional resources. I will also earmark $10 billion to support establishment of 2 research clusters on healthcare technologies and on artificial intelligence and robotic technologies to attract the world's top scientific research institutions and technology enterprises to Hong Kong for conducting more midstream and downstream R&D projects in collaboration with local universities and scientific institutions. Such cluster will pull and nurture more talent in Hong Kong. I will provide financial support for non-profit making scientific research institutions that will establish their presence in these 2 clusters. To reinforce the role of the Science Park as Hong Kong's flagship technology infrastructure, I will allocate $10 billion to the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation, Of this, about $3 billion will be used to construct research-related infrastructure facilities, whereas the remaining $7 billion will be used for the HKSTPC to enhance support for its tenants and incubators, and set up a smart campus in the park, etc. Moreover, I will allocate $200 million to Cyberport to enhance support for startup and promote the development of digital technology ecosystem. Cybersystem is going to launch an easy lending program to attract multinational companies, including overseas and mainland leading internet enterprises and fintech companies, to set up offices and R&D units in Hong Kong. It will also roll a new support scheme offering financial assistance up to $200,000 for each eligible startup to conduct market research and promotion, as well as participate in business missions, trade fairs, and exhibitions, etc. outside Hong Kong. The financial assistance offered under Cyberport's incubation program to individual startups will also increase by 50% to $500,000. In recent years, esports have been developing rapidly with tremendous potential. Last December, Cyberport completed a study on the promotion of esports in Hong Kong and made a number of recommendations. To promote the development of esports, I will allocate $100 million to Cyberport. The Cyberport Arcade will become a local esports and digital entertainment node, providing a competition venue for esports. Support will also be provided for the esports sector in areas such as technology development and talent nurturing. To encourage R&D, the Chief Executive announced in her policy address that provision of additional tax deduction for domestic expenditure on R&D incurred by enterprises. Enterprises will enjoy a 300% tax deduction for the first $2 million qualifying R&D expenditure, and a 200% deduction for the remainder. Drafting of the legislation and consultation have already commenced. I set up the Committee on Innovation, Technology, and Reindustrialization last April to promote reindustrialization. The Data Technology Hub and the Advanced Manufacturing Center under construction are expected to be completed in 2020 and 2022 respectively. We're also expanding the Science Park, which is expected to provide extra space for startup and other technology company in 2 years. Moreover, the Hong Kong Productivity Council established an InnoSpace last October to provide working space and technical support for startups, students, and graduates to help them develop their innovative ideas into industrial design, which may be subsequently be translated into products through prototyping. In addition to the above new initiatives, the government will also relax the eligibility criteria for the Technology Voucher Program. All local enterprises, irrespective of size and duration of operation, may apply. This will enable more medium enterprises and startups to benefit from the program. Further, we'll earmark $500 million under the ITF to implement in the second half of the year the Technology Talent Scheme as announced in the policy address. One of the initiatives is to establish a postdoctorate hub program to provide funding support for all eligible institutions to recruit postdoctoral talent. The scheme will also provide funding to subsidize local enterprises on a matching basis for training staff on high-end technologies. President, while we foster development of new industries, we should also strengthen the traditional industry where we enjoy clear advantages. Hong Kong has long been leading Asia in the financial service industry. Looking ahead, China will continue to take center stage in driving global economic development. We must upgrade and enrich our pool of financial talent if we are to maintain our leading edge and firmly remain in the most competitive financial center in Asia. To this end, I've asked the Hong Kong Monetary Authority to make plans to set up an Academy of Finance in collaboration with the Financial Services Development Council, the financial sector, tertiary institutions, professional training bodies, and regulators for promoting cross-sector expertise sharing and collaboration in applied research. The Financial Leaders Forum I chair has laid down the general principles on developing Hong Kong into a preferred listing platform for emerging and innovative enterprises. The new regime should be in place in the second quarter of this year after the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong has consulted the market on the proposed specific arrangements and the amendments to the listing rules. It will boost Hong Kong competitiveness as a listing platform and attract listing applications from emerging and innovative enterprises, including large enterprises with weighted voting rights structure and pre-revenue biotechnology enterprises. We will ensure appropriate safeguards for investors and uphold the quality of our market under the new regime. We have seen rapid growth in the Asian bond market in recent years, with US $300 billion worth of US dollar bonds issued in Asian economies other than Japan last year, 60% more than 2016. We expect that the Asian bond markets will continue to expand to encourage more investors and issuers from the mainland, Asia, and along the Belt and Road to participate in the Hong Kong bond market. The government plans to launch an array of measures to enhance our competitiveness, including attracting corporate bond issuance, facilitating investor participation, and broadening investment platform. First, I propose to launch a 3-year pilot bond grant scheme to attract local, mainland, and overseas enterprises to issue bonds in Hong Kong. The pilot scheme will cover eligible enterprises issuing bonds in Hong Kong for the first time. The amount of grant for each bond issuance equivalent to the half of the issue expenses, capped at 2.5 million Hong Kong dollars. Each enterprise can apply for a grant for 2 bond issuance at most. The HKMA will announce the details in due course. I also propose to amend the qualifying debt instrument scheme by increasing the types of qualified instruments. In addition to instruments launched and cleared by the Central Money Markets Unit of the HKMA, debt securities listed on the SEHK will also become eligible. We will also extend the scope of tax exemption from debt instruments with an original maturity of not less than 7 years to instruments of any duration. Under the enhanced scheme, Hong Kong investors will enjoy tax concession for interest income and trading profits derived from a more diverse range of debt instruments. On developing retail bonds, I propose to continue the issuance of silver bonds in 2018 and 19, targeting Hong Kong residents aged 65 or above. To demonstrate the government's commitment to promoting green finance, I propose to launch a green bond issuance program with a borrowing ceiling of $100 billion. The sum borrowed will be credited to the Capital Works Reserve Fund to provide funding for the green public works project of the government. This measure will encourage more issuers to arrange financing for their green projects through our capital markets. The government will submit a resolution to the Legislative Council as soon as possible so that the inaugural government green bonds can be issued in 2018-19. The Hong Kong Quality Assurance Agency launched the Green Finance Certification Scheme last month to provide third-party certification service for potential green bond issuers. We will introduce a green bond grant scheme to subsidize qualified green bond issuers using the certification scheme. On asset and wealth management, the government has introduced a number of initiatives in recent years to sharpen the competitive edge of Hong Kong's fund industry and diversify the management platform. These initiatives include removing constraints in the existing legal structure, providing a more facilitating tax environment, and expanding the distribution network. It is expected that the regime for the open-ended fund companies to be used as a fund vehicle and the relevant tax exemption arrangements can commence operation later this year. Besides, we will review the existing tax concession arrangements applicable to the fund industry with regard to international requirements on tax cooperation. The Government will also examine the feasibility of introducing a limited partnership regime for private equity funds and the related tax arrangements. To attract multinational and mainland enterprises to establish corporate treasury centers in Hong Kong, the government will further amend the Inland Revenue Ordinance to extend the coverage of property tax concessions to specify treasury services provided by qualifying corporate treasury centers to all their onshore associated corporations. Hong Kong maintains the world's largest offshore renminbi liquidity pool. Apart from issuing renminbi sovereign bonds in Hong Kong 9 years in a row, the Ministry of Finance also issued US dollar sovereign bonds here last October. This is not only conducive to the development of the Hong Kong bond market, but also helps promote the integration of the mainland financial markets into the global market. We have provided profit tax exemption for non-renminbi, including US dollar sovereign bonds issued in Hong Kong by the Central People's Government, so as to ensure that Hong Kong continues to be the premier platform for our country to issue sovereign bonds in different currencies. Moreover, to promote mutual market access between Hong Kong and the mainland, we will continue to explore the possibility of including a wider range of investment products into the two-way mutual access mechanism. The HKM is prepared to launch a faster payment system offering 24 hours real-time payment function. This will allow banks and stored value facility service providers to provide real-time, round-the-clock cross-institution payment and fund transfer service to their business and personal customers. Moreover, since the virtual banks are considered commercially and technically viable based on overseas experience, the HKM is consulting industry on reviewing and amending the relevant guidelines and will make the best endeavor to issue licenses within this year. For the insurance industry, I will ask the Insurance Authority to explore ways of enhancing Hong Kong competitiveness as an insurance hub, including tax arrangements and other regulatory requirements in collaboration with the industry. The Hong Kong Mortgage Corporation Limited will launch a life annuity scheme in the middle of this year. Purchasers will only have to pay a lump sum in exchange for a stable flow of monthly income. In view of the community's positive response to the scheme, the HKMC will actively consider increasing its issuance size. Deferred annuity products are already available in the market. They can be purchased by means of contributions, allowing greater flexibility in the amount and duration of payment. To encourage development of the deferred annuity markets, thereby offering more options for people in making financial arrangements for retirement, I will ask the Insurance Authority to issue guidelines and enable all deferred annuity products available in the market meeting the guidelines to enjoy tax concessions. As contributions made to such financial products for retirement protection are similar in nature to voluntary contributions made to the Mandatory Provident Fund, the proposed tax concessions will be applicable to MPF voluntary contributions. To meet the long-term saving objectives for retirement protection, voluntary contributions we have enjoyed tax deduction will be transferred to the mandatory contribution accounts and subject to the same withdrawal restrictions on mandatory contributions. And President, I have set aside a dedicated provision of $500 million for the development of the financial services industry in the coming 5 years, providing necessary support for the bond market development, fintech, green finance, manpower training, and other aspects of financial services. Expanding our free trade agreement and investment promotion and protection agreement networks would help Hong Kong businesses and investors open up new markets, protect their overseas investments, and attract foreign investors to Hong Kong. In addition to signing to closer economic partnership arrangements with the mainland and Macau, we have forged 4 FTAs and 20 IPPAs with other economies. The signing of the comprehensive avoidance of double taxation agreements not only will benefit our businessmen, but will also attract more enterprise to use Hong Kong as their base for overseas investments. The government has so far concluded CDTAs with 38 tax jurisdictions. We will actively seek to sign FTAs, IPPAs, and CDTAs with other economies, including those along the Belt and Road, to fortify our position as an international trade and investment hub. As a facilitator and a promoter for economic development, the government will be more proactive in strengthening and consolidating Hong Kong's edge as a trading and logistic hub. The government will actively enhance the supporting infrastructure to increase the handling capacity of both air and maritime cargo, with the view of moving the trading and logistic industry up the value chain. On air transport, the Hong Kong International Airport has been the world's busiest cargo airport for 7 years in a row. The cargo it handled accounted for about 1.6% of the total cargo volume by weight, but 40% of imports and exports by value. Situated at the heart of Asia, the HKIA boasts a vast global network. This, together with the proximity to the Pearl River Delta and the Bay Area, as well as the imminent commissioning of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, promises ample opportunities for our air cargo industry. The booming of global e-commerce has generated demands for cross-border logistics and delivery services, particularly air delivery and transshipment services. In December 2017, the Airport Authority Hong Kong made available a site of around 5.3 hectares at the South Cargo Precinct of the airport island to develop a modern air cargo logistics center. We are actively considering the redevelopment of the Airmail Center at the HKIA, which has been operating for 20 years. This center will be equipped with modern facilities to significantly enhance efficiency and capacity. Fiscal planning, I've set aside $5 billion for the project. In addition, we're engaging with AA and other postal authorities to explore collaborations with a view to maximizing the use of the center's transit handling capability to foster cross-border logistics and trading activities. Our strategic objective is to develop Hong Kong into a trading, storage, logistic, and distribution hub for high-value goods such as pharmaceuticals. Between 2014 and 2016, the pharmaceuticals handled by the HKIA grew by over 30%. The AA and the industry will continue to proactively enhance HKIA capacity to handle high-value temperature-controlled goods and adopt the necessary temperature control facilities to cater for the specialties in handling such goods. Hong Kong is a free port. As we upgrade our facilities, we'll also move ahead with the times and review existing measures timely with the view of facilitating the trade and attaining the greatest economic benefits. At present, trade declaration is not required for transshipment cargo via Hong Kong, and the level of declaration charges for imports and exports are kept at a low level. To encourage the trading and logistics industry to move up the value chain, the government will cap the charge for each declaration at $200 so as to further lower the cost of importing and exporting high-value goods to and from Hong Kong and enhance Hong Kong's advantage as a trading hub. The measure is expected to save the trade $455 million per year and benefiting about 900,000 cases. On maritime industry, the Hong Kong Maritime Port Board was established in 2016 to foster development of our maritime and port sectors and high-value added maritime services. The Transport Housing Bureau is now working with the sector to map out strategies and explore measures that would facilitate the development of maritime industry in Hong Kong. The government will continue to devote resources to promote our maritime industry. Invest Hong Kong will also set up a dedicated team to strengthen promotion to attract more renowned maritime enterprises to operate in Hong Kong. On tourism, we strive to develop Hong Kong into a world-class premier tourism destination to ensure the healthy and sustainable development of the industry. And for the new financial year, I will allocate an additional $396 million to the tourism industry, of which $226 million will be provided for the Hong Kong Tourism Board to implement the development blueprint for Hong Kong tourism industry released by the Tourism Commission last year.
The development blueprint sets out 4 development strategies, namely 1, to develop a diversified portfolio of visitor source market for Hong Kong, with focus on attracting high value-added overnight visitors. 2, to nurture and develop tourism products and initiatives with local and international characteristics. 3, to develop smart tourism. And 4, to upgrade the service quality of our tourism industry. Highlights include A, supporting the trade in exploring tourism business opportunities arising from the Belt and Road Initiative, the development of the Bay Area, as well as commissioning of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen Hong Kong Express Rail Link (XRL) and the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, including organizing a tourism forum under the themes of Belt and Road and the Bay Area, with a business matching conference in collaboration with Hong Kong Tourism Board. B, providing new experience for visitors by incorporating design elements and making use of I&T applications as well as light and art installations that blend with district characteristics at major tourist spots. C, promoting green tourism by enhancing supporting facilities at popular hiking trails and those with good tourism potential. And D, allocating additional funding of $30 million to the Travel Industry Council of Hong Kong for enhancing the pilot information technology development matching fund scheme for travel agents. I'll also allocate a total of $310 million in the next few years to support the Ocean Park in developing education and tourism projects for the benefit of local students. The Ocean Park will distribute 10,000 complimentary admission tickets to primary and secondary school students in the coming year. Business and professional services. The government is committed to expanding its network of economic and trade offices, ETOs. At present, we have 12 overseas ETOs. To enhance trade relations with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, opening up the emerging opportunities there, as well as actively participate in and support the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chief Executive announced that an ETO will be set up in Thailand. We're in close liaison with the Thai government to this end. Regarding our proposal to set up new ETOs in countries including Korea, India, Russia, and the United Arab Emirates, we're actively following up with government's concern. The government has launched a Professional Services Advancement Support Scheme to provide funding support for business and professional organizations, thereby facilitating external promotion and enhancement of Hong Kong's professional services. I encourage the professional services sector to work with other sectors in applying for funding and exploring new business opportunities. Hong Kong is a home to about 330,000 small and medium enterprises, accounting for over 98% of total number of local enterprises. To help SMEs, including startups, grasp economic opportunities and boost their competitiveness, I would enhance the current funding schemes as follows. A, injecting $1.5 billion into the dedicated fund on branding, upgrading, and domestic sales, BUD fund. B, injecting $1 billion into the SME export marketing and development funds. C, extending the geographical scope of the enterprise support program under the BUD fund from the mainland to include the ASEAN countries. The respective cumulative funding ceiling for enterprises undertaking projects in the mainland and ASEAN markets will be $1 million. D, increasing the cumulative funding ceiling for enterprises under the SME Export Market Fund from $200,000 to $400,000 and removing the existing condition on the use of the last $50,000 of grants. E, extending the application period for the special concessionary measures under the SME Financing Guarantee Scheme to 28th of February 2019, and F, in the 5 financial year from 2018-19, providing a total of $250 million additional funding to Hong Kong Trade Development Council for assisting local enterprises, SMEs in particular, in seizing opportunities arising from the Belt and Road Initiative and the Bay Area development, promoting the development of e-commerce and enhancing Hong Kong's role as a premier international convention, exhibition and sourcing center. The Information Services Department, our ETOs overseas and in the mainland, Invest Hong Kong and Hong Kong TDC will strengthen collaboration and take a more proactive approach in promoting our advantages overseas and attracting investment to Hong Kong. Despite its claim for high efficiency, Hong Kong's construction industry must continue to upgrade through wider adoption of innovative technology to enhance productivity, built environment, environmental performance and site safety. The Construction Industry Council established the Construction Innovation and Technology Application Center last year, leading the industry to embrace innovation through collecting, exhibiting, and experiencing the latest construction technology and applications. Starting this year, the government will adopt Building Information Modeling (BIM) technology in the design and construction of major government capital works projects. The CIC will formulate BIM technical standards, help equip the industry, and encourage the use of such technology in private works projects. Furthermore, we are now assisting the industry in establishing large-scale, highly automated steel reinforcing bar prefabrication yards. The government will also take the lead in piloting modular integrated construction (MIC) in public projects. We are considering extending the current gross floor area concessions for promoting green and innovation buildings to cover buildings adopting MIC. We are also conducting studies on relevant manufacturing facilities to provide the wider use of such a construction method in Hong Kong. I propose to set up a $1 billion Construction Innovation and Technology Fund to boost the capacity of enterprises and practitioners in the construction industry to adopt new technology and support the industry to harness innovative technology. Eligible contractors, registered subcontractors and consultants can apply for financial support from the fund to acquire the software and hardware as well as to nurture the expertise required for using local and overseas innovative construction technology such as BIM, steel reinforcing bar products produced in local prefabrication yards, and MIC when carrying out construction projects. The fund will also support students and practitioners of the construction industry to receive training on innovative construction technology. On creative industries, since 2009, the government has injected a total of $1 billion into the Create Smart initiatives. In the new financial year, the government intends to inject another $1 billion into the CSI to strengthen support for the development of the creative industry, especially nurturing youth and helping startups, and also to enable the Hong Kong Design Center to implement initiatives to enhance public understanding of the value of creativity and design. Talents are essential elements for economic development and social progress. The government must invest heavily in nurturing talent, provide diversified learning, training, and development opportunities, and create employment and business startup opportunities with good prospects for our young people. Upon taking office, the current term government has pledged to increase recurrent expenditure on education by $5 billion, of which $3.6 billion has been approved by the Legislature. I propose to commit an additional recurrent expenditure of $2 billion to achieve quality education. The initiative to be launched include enhancing the professional development of teachers, strengthening support for kindergartens, reviewing and improving integrated education, and supporting schools in enhancing promotion of lifelong learning. I also propose to allocate $2.5 billion for launching the 8th round of matching grant scheme to help the 10 publicly funded post-secondary institutions tap more funding resources, promote community involvement, and improve the quality of education. Furthermore, the government will invite the Quality Education Fund Steering Committee to consider allocating $3 billion for application by primary and secondary schools, kindergartens, and special schools through simplified procedures for launching school-based curriculum development and student support measures, as well as the relevant school improvement works and procurement of supplies. I will also make an additional provision of $2 billion to expedite installation of lifts for public sector schools as needed to build barrier-free campuses. In the 2018-19 school year, I will regularize the pilot scheme on promoting interflows between sister schools in Hong Kong and the mainland, under which participating schools will receive a grant of $150,000 per annum. The additional annual expenditure is expected to be around $170 million. To cater for students with care needs, the government would increase the nursing support of schools for students with intellectual disabilities, schools for children with physical disability, and schools for children with visual impairment, intellectual disability. Nurses will be provided for schools with children with visual impairment, as well as schools for children with hearing impairment. The additional annual expenditure is expected to be around $26 million. I propose to inject $800 million into the Gifted Education Fund in 2018-19 to enhance the development of gifted students. Another $800 million will be injected into the Hong Kong SAR Government Scholarship Fund to increase the number of scholarships starting from 2019-20 academic year to incentivize students to pursue excellence in both academic and non-academic areas. As the Hong Kong Jockey Club Life-wide Learning Fund is coming to an end, I'll earmark $2.5 billion to set up a new Student Activities Support Fund. The fund will continue to provide support for students with financial needs to participate in life-wide learning activities for whole-person development. Since the 2014-15 academic year, we have implemented the pilot training and support scheme through the Vocational Training Council to provide quality and diversified vocational and professional education and training for young people. The scheme will continue to be implemented in 2018-19 academic year. I will provide adequate resources to regularize the scheme. The Education Bureau will review the implementation of the scheme this year to finalize the regularization arrangements. To encourage members of the public to pursue self-enhancement, the government will raise the subsidy ceiling of the continuing education fund from $10,000 to $20,000 per applicant. Those who once opened a CEF account may also benefit from this initiative. In parallel, we extend the upper age limit for CEF applicants to 70, lift the restriction on the validity period and the number of claims, and expand the scope of the CEF to include all courses in the qualifications register. I'll further inject an additional $8.5 billion into the CEF. It is expected that a total of about 610,000 recipients will benefit from the enhancements. Youth development has a significant bearing on the future of Hong Kong. We will set up the Youth Development Commission in the first half of this year, chaired by the Chief Secretary for Administration. The Commission will promote youth development in a more holistic manner and address young people's concerns about education, career pursuit, home ownership, public policy discussion and debate, and participation in politics. I'll set aside $1 billion to support the work of the Commission with a view to giving young people more room to unleash their potential and more opportunities for upward mobility. We'll make good use of our resources and invest for the future to enhance the quality of life with a view to building Hong Kong into a more ideal place for living and working. Land and housing supply has been a long-standing problem in Hong Kong. The government has been making every effort to identify land and boost housing supply. Over the past few years, through land use reviews, we have identified over 210 sites with housing development potential in the short to medium term. The sites can provide a total of more than 310,000 flats, of which about 70% would be for public housing. The majority of these sites require the completion of feasibility studies and necessary procedures, including planning, consultation, rezoning, funding, acquisition, land resumption, clearance, reprovisioning, and site formation, before they are ready for housing construction. As for the actual supply of housing units, the estimated public housing production for the next 5 years is around 100,000 units. of which about 75,000 are public rental housing units and about 25,000 are subsidized sales flats. On the private housing flats, based on the preliminary estimation, the private sector will, on average, complete about 20,800 residential units annually in the next 5 years, representing an increase of about 50% over the past 5 years. Including the 15 sites rolled over from 2017-18, the 2018-19 land sale program comprises a total of 27 residential sites capable of providing 15,200 residential units, together with railway property development projects, the Urban Renewal Authorities project, and private development and redevelopment projects. The potential land supply for the whole year is expected to have a capacity to produce about 25,500 units. The Development Bureau will announce tomorrow the land sale program for the next financial year. In the short to medium term, we provide about 380,000 residential flats in total. By rezoning sites, increasing development density as appropriate, and taking forward projects at the Kai-Tak development area and Anderson Road Quarry, railway property development projects, and urban renewal projects. As for the medium to long term, we'll press ahead with a number of projects in new development areas and railway property development projects such as Siu Wan, in order to provide about 220,000 residential units. Of these projects, reclamation works of the Tung Chung New Town extension have started. The 130 hectares of land to be formed is expected to provide some 40,000 residential units from 2023-24 in phases. The government will continue to increase the supply of commercial floor area through various means. Apart from releasing approximately 560,000 square meters of commercial and office floor area, through reprovisioning the existing government facilities in the two areas in Kwun Tong and Kowloon Bay, it is expected that a number of commercial sites located at the Kai-Tak development area, above the terminus of Hong Kong section of the XRL, and at the new Central Harbour Front, Caroline Hill Road, Queensway Plaza, and Sai Yi Street, etc., will also be put up for sale in the next few years. These sites will provide a total floor area of about 1.1 million square meters. Among these sites, 4 commercial or hotel sites will be included in the 2018-19 land sale program, capable of providing about 530,000 square meters of floor area. The Task Force on Land Supply will launch a public engagement exercise in the first half of this year to discuss with all sectors of the community the options and priorities for increasing land supply. Recommendations will be submitted to the government by the end of this year. At present, very vacant government sites or school premises are available for use by NGOs through short-term tenancies. However, since these sites may have been left idle for a long time, restoration or other works are required before they can be put to use. I will set aside $1 billion to subsidize the cost of basic works of eligible projects and coordinate the efforts of government departments in providing technical advice to the user organizations to make better use of these vacant government sites and school premises. We also pursue the single-site multiple-use model in multi-story development of GIC sites. One example is the proposed redevelopment of Tuen Mun Clinic. With a view to optimizing land use, our initial thinking is to reprovision and consolidate the existing healthcare and other government services in the new high-rise building, where elderly care facilities needed in the district will also be provided. Apart from land and housing, healthcare is another issue of utmost concern to the community. The government has increased its recurrent expenditure on healthcare by an average of 7% over the past decade. A 10-year hospital development plan amounting to $200 billion has also commenced. The expenditure on public healthcare services will increase by 13.3% to $71.2 billion in 2018-19, accounting for 70.5% of total recurrent expenditure. And the additional recurrent funding of nearly $6 billion will be allocated to the Hospital Authority in 2018-19 to increase the number of hospital beds, operating theatre sessions, the quota for general outpatient and specialist outpatient services, and the manpower required. The government will progressively increase the recurrent provision for the HA on a triennial basis, having regard to population growth and demographic changes. This will enable more effective resource planning by the HA To tackle the recent influenza surge, DHA has deployed $500 million for implementing relief measures to alleviate the work pressure on frontline healthcare personnel. DHA will also examine the abolition of the policy on incremental pay increase in the first 2 years of service in respect of certain new recruits so as to boost morale and retain staff, ensure the availability of adequate resources. In the light of the increasing demand for healthcare services, I have invited the HA to start planning the second 10-year hospital development plan instead of waiting for the midterm review of the first 10-year plan to be conducted in 2021. The second 10-year plan will cover the study of in-situ redevelopment of Princess Margaret Hospital and Twinmont Hospital, construction of a new hospital at the Kings Park site, i.e. the existing Queen Elizabeth Hospital site, and expansion of North Lantau Hospital, is expected to deliver 3,000 to 4,000 additional hospital beds, providing additional facilities and quota for consultation. The government will also plan for other public health care facilities such as community health centers and ambulatory care centers and improve the clinic facilities under the Department of Health by phases. Over the past decade, the number of university grants committee-funded healthcare training places has substantially increased by about 60%. to almost 1,800, of which the number of bachelor degree places in medicine has increased from 250 to 470, representing a rise of almost 90%. The government is discussing with the UGC further increase in publicly funded training places for doctors, dentists, nurses, and relevant allied health professionals in the coming 3 years. The government has invited the university concerned and the Prince Philip Dental Hospital to actively consider further enhancing and increasing teaching facilities so as to expand their capacity for healthcare manpower training. To support the second 10-year hospital development plan, improve the clinic facilities in DH, and upgrade and increase healthcare teaching facilities, I have set aside a sum of $300 billion as an initial provision. There will be a total of over 2,000 medical graduates in the coming 5 years. I will ensure that the HA has adequate resources to employ all local medical graduates. Some additional $200 million will be allocated each year to enhance the healthcare professional training provided by the HA, including clinical practicum, as well as specialists and higher training. The government is conducting a comprehensive review of the planning for primary healthcare services with a view to drawing up a blueprint. The first district health center will be set up in Kwai Ching district in the third quarter of next year, after which we will progressively set up such centers in all 18 districts. Provision of community healthcare services can raise public awareness of personal health management, enhance disease prevention, and strengthen medical and rehabilitation services in the community, thereby reducing unwarranted use of hospital services. I will set aside necessary resources to fully support this initiative. I will provide an additional annual funding of $100 million for DH to promote healthy lifestyle in the community in order to reduce non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, cancers, diabetes, and chronic respiratory diseases. At the same time, the DH will promote mental health and ensure public education to minimize stigmatization. The government will provide about $54 million to launch a 3-year project for more NGOs to provide free oral checkups, dental treatments, and oral health education for adults with intellectual disability. We'll also increase the funding for the Prince Philip Dental Hospital to provide special care training for participating dentists and dental surgery assistants. I've asked the departments concerned to improve the existing dental care services for the elderly. The accumulation limit of elderly health care vouchers will be raised from $4,000 to $5,000 in 2018 to allow greater flexibility to users. In 2018-19, I provide, on a one-off basis, an additional $1,000 worth of vouchers to eligible elderly persons, which will involve an expenditure of about $796 million. Elderly healthcare vouchers can be used on services provided by medical practitioners, dentists, and Chinese medicine practitioners in the non-public sector. The colorectal cancer screening pilot program enables early identification of sufferers and high-risk individuals. The government will regularize the program and progressively extend it to cover individuals aged between 50 and 75. This initiative would incur total expenditure of $940 million over the coming 5 years. I propose to establish a $500 million fund to promote the development of Chinese medicine by providing support in areas such as applied research, Chinese medicine specialization, knowledge exchange and cross-market cooperation, and help local Chinese medicine traders with the production and registration of Chinese proprietary medicines. The Chinese Medical Medicine Unit to be set up by the Food and Health Bureau will be responsible for coordination work. The FHB will announce the details of the voluntary health insurance scheme shortly. I propose to provide tax deduction for people who purchase eligible health insurance products for themselves or their dependents under the scheme. The annual tax ceiling of premium for tax deduction is $8,000 per insured person. In recent years, the HA has carried out appraisals of new drugs and expanded the coverage of the drug formulary regularly. It will closely monitor the R&D of new drugs and the related medical evidence so that patients can receive appropriate treatment as soon as possible. The Community Care Fund has launched an assistance program to provide eligible patients with subsidies for the purchase of ultra-expensive drugs, including those for treating uncommon diseases. It will also extend the scope of the program to subsidize individual patients with special clinical needs in using specific drugs. The HA will complete a review of the patient's co-payment mechanism under the CCF's program in the first half of this year and propose improvement measures. I will set aside $500 million for this purpose. Let me now turn to arts and culture. Hong Kong is an international city with a unique blend of the East and the West, displaying richness and diversity in arts and culture. The CG Center of the West Kowloon Cultural District will be completed this year, while other major facilities will also come on stream in the next few years. In order to continuously upgrade our cultural hardware, I'll set aside $20 billion for the improvement and development of cultural facilities. Projects to roll out in the coming 10 years include the construction of the New Territories East Cultural Center and the Heritage Conservation Resource Center, the expansion of Hong Kong Science Museum, Hong Kong Museum of History, and Hong Kong City Hall, and the renovation of the Hong Kong Cultural Center. I also allocate $500 million to the Leisure and Cultural Services Department for the acquisition of museum collections and holding exhibitions. On support for arts groups and artists starting from 2018-19, an additional recurrent provision of $55 million will be provided to support the 9 major performance arts groups, as well as small and medium arts groups funded by the Hong Kong Arts Development Council. More resources will be allocated to small and medium arts groups under the Venue Partnership Scheme implemented by the LCSD. I'll inject an additional $500 million into the Art Development Matching Grants Pilot Scheme and consider relaxing its matching parameters to encourage donation from the business and private sectors in support of the development of arts groups. To showcase Hong Kong's art and culture, I will, from 2018 and 19 onwards, progressively increase the current recurrent provision to $50 million to support Hong Kong's arts groups and artists to perform and stage exhibitions outside Hong Kong. Moreover, in the coming 5 years, I'll provide $40 million additional funding to the Hong Kong Arts Festival Society for commissioning creative works and performances by local arts groups and artists during the Arts Festival, $20 million to expand the Community Cultural Ambassador Scheme, and another $140 million to support local arts groups and artists for cultural exchanges in the Bay Area. The government announced the first representative list of the Intangible Cultural Heritage, ICH, of Hong Kong last year. I'll allocate $300 million to strengthen the protection, promotion, and transmission of the ICH. Furthermore, I'll inject $70 million into the Cantonese Opera Development Fund to support the production and performances of local Cantonese troupes, with a view to promoting the development of Cantonese opera as a world intangible cultural heritage item. Cultivating a reading habit among the public is conducive to the promotion of culture and enhance humanistic qualities. In the coming 5 years, I'll allocate an additional $200 million to the Hong Kong public libraries to promote reading among children and families. Besides, the LCSD will work with the Education Bureau, community partners, local authors, and publishers to promote the culture of reading for all. Sports. In recent years, the number of people participating in major sports events and community sports activities is rising, and Hong Kong's athletes have achieved remarkable results in various sports competitions. The government will continue to allocate resources to promote sports in the community, support elite sports, and develop Hong Kong into a center for major international sports events. I'll inject $1 billion into the sports portion of the Arts and Sports Development Fund to support sports organization and the training of athletes and hosting competition. I'll also allocate $100 million for the launch of a 5-year district sports program funding scheme to encourage wider community participation in sports.
On top of the $1 billion injection into the Elite Athletes Development Fund announced in January last year, I have decided to inject another $5 billion, bringing the total to $6 billion into the fund to provide greater support for elite athletes. I will allocate $500 million for a new major sports events matching grant scheme to encourage the business sector to sponsor large-scale sports events, thereby providing our athletes with more opportunities to compete in high-level competitions on home ground. This year, the LCSD will conduct a comprehensive review of the sports subvention scheme. We'll make reference to the review findings and provide the necessary resources for the scheme. We will also conduct a technical feasibility study on the redevelopment of the Olympic House to provide office and activity space for the Sports Federation and Olympic Committee of Hong Kong, China, and national sports associations. On environment, the government will continue its endeavor to improve the environment and combat climate change. Following the allocation of $200 million last year, I will set aside another $800 million this year to further promote the installation of renewable energy facilities at government buildings, venues, and community facilities. The government will also enhance tax concessions for capital expenditure incurred by enterprises in procuring eligible energy-efficient building installations and renewable energy devices by allowing tax deduction to be claimed in full in 1 year instead of the current time frame of 5 years. The Environment Bureau will announce the details later. To improve roadside air quality and reduce air pollutant emissions in a sustained manner, we'll continue to encourage walking and the use of public transport, and take forward other initiatives, such as promoting the use of electric vehicles. The current first registration tax concessions for electric vehicles will cease on the 31st of March 2018, taking into account factors such as the technological development and market situation in electric vehicles, road traffic conditions, and view of stakeholders. The government has decided to continue to waive in full the FRT for electric commercial vehicles, electric motor vehicles, and electric motor tricycles until 31st of March 2021. As for electric private cars, on one hand, the government has to contain the number of private cars to prevent traffic congestion and aggravation of roadside air pollution. On the other hand, we hope to encourage car owners to go for electric vehicles as far as possible. Hence, apart from continuing with the current FRT concession of up to $97,500, we will also launch a 1-for-1 replacement scheme from today to allow eligible private car owners who buy a new electric private car and scrap an eligible private car they own to enjoy a higher FRT concession of up to $250,000. The above concessions will remain in force until 31st of March 2021. The Environmental Protection Department and the Transport Department will announce the details later. On district facilities, there's arising expectations to increase district facilities. The District Council has also put forward various suggestions in their passages building community complexes and improving pedestrian lanes. I will set aside $8 billion to respond to the proposals of the 18 districts. The Home Affairs Bureau will coordinate and follow up with the relevant policy bureau and departments. On public markets, apart from making available resources to build public markets in districts with such needs, I will earmark $2 billion for implementing a market modernization program over the next 10 years, which will entail a comprehensive review of nearly 100 existing markets and improvement works, including early installation of air conditioning system, major overhaul, or redevelopment. President, I will make optimum use of our resources to cater those in need with the aim of building a caring and sharing society. Last October's policy address proposed an array of measures to improve elderly services, involving a total recurring provision of about $1.263 billion and non-recurrent expenditure of about $2.229 billion. These measures include A. Increasing the number of vouchers under the pilot scheme on Community Care Service Voucher for the elderly. B. Set up the Innovation and Technology Fund for application in elderly and rehabilitation care. C. Providing professional outreach services and visiting medical practitioner services for residents in private residential care homes for the elderly and residential care homes for persons with disabilities. And D. Increasing the salaries of frontline care staff of subsidized elderly service units. Furthermore, I will make an additional provision of about $63 million to provide speech therapy services for the elderly service units, which will benefit some 22,000 elderly persons with swallowing difficulties on speech impairment. Rehabilitation services. Last year, the government announced the provision of trust services for parents whose children have special needs. I will allocate $15 million to set up a dedicated office for this purpose. Moreover, I will make an additional annual provision of $660 million to improve the rehabilitation service through various measures, including increasing 2,469 subvented rehabilitation service places and purchasing an additional 1,500 private RCHD places. B. Providing speech therapy services in hostel for moderately mentally handicapped persons, hostel for severely mentally handicapped persons, hostel for severely physically handicapped persons with mental handicap, and care and detention homes for the severely disabled persons. C. Providing additional places under the Extended Program and Work Extension Program. D. Providing clinical psychological service to strengthen support for ex-mentally ill persons and step up community education for early prevention and mental illness, as well as enhancing support for visually impaired persons, children of hearing impaired persons, and children of ex-mentally ill persons. E. Strengthening the professional support provided by medical social workers in the child assessment centers of the DH and the general and psychiatric hospitals of the HA. F. Regularizing the pilot project on strengthening support for persons with autism and their parents or carers. And G. Increasing the number of Parents Resources Center to support children with disability or special needs and their parents or carers. And supporting disadvantaged and caring for the young, the government will allocate an additional annual provision of some $92 million to strengthen manpower for residential child care services. It will make use of the Lotteries Fund to improve the environment of small group homes. The government will also set up 5 centers for separated or divorced families and will strengthen the manpower of the Integrated Family Service Centers and Family and Child Protection Services units of the Social Welfare Department to enable early identification and more effective intervention for families at risk of separation or divorce. Additional recurrent provision involved will be around $56 million. In recent months, is set to see several child abuse cases. I will allocate some $504 million from the Lotteries Fund to launch a 3-year pilot scheme to provide social work services in phases for about 150,000 children and their families in all aided child care centers, kindergartens, and kindergarten-cum-child care centers. Moreover, from the 2018-19 school year, more resources will be provided for the public sector primary school to encourage them to strengthen and enhance their social work and counseling services according to school-based circumstances with a view to ultimately achieving the target of 1 school social worker for each school. Besides, we'll improve the provision of school social workers in special schools. I will also strengthen the manpower of SWD Family and Child Protective Service units and the workforce of NGOs supporting the education program on stopping domestic violence. The recurring expenditure involved will amount to some $43 million. I will also provide subvention to NGOs for setting up cyber youth support teams to reach out to high-risk or hidden youths to provide early intervention and support. I will also enhance the district support scheme for children and youth development for raising the ceiling of cash assistance and increasing the number of quotas for disadvantaged children and youths. The additional recurring expenditure involved will be $20.5 million and $11 million respectively. On ethnic minorities, there were some 250,000 ethnic minorities in Hong Kong, making up 3.8% of our whole population. Many of them have taken root in Hong Kong as regard Hong Kong as their home. The government always strives to encourage and facilitate the integration of ethnic minorities into society. Yet they are still facing a lot of difficulties. To enhance collaboration within the government on support for the ethnic minorities, the Chief Secretary for Administration will set up a steering committee to coordinate, review, and monitor work in this area. I will earmark $500 million to strengthen support for ethnic minorities. And to encourage employers to hire job seekers with special employment needs, I will make additional annual funding of $48 million to enhance the special employment programs of the Labor Department. These initiatives include A. Provide an on-the-job training allowance of up to $4,000 per month for a period of 6 to 12 months for employers engaging people aged 60 or above who have left the workforce or are unemployed. B. Raising the monthly on-the-job training allowance ceiling under the Youth Employment Training Program by $1,000 to $4,000 per month for a period of 6 to 12 months. And C. Extending the work adaptation period under the Work Orientation and Placement Scheme from 2 months to 3 months, and increasing the maximum amount of allowance payable to employees engaging people with disabilities by $16,000 to $51,000. And the government have concerned about the employment rates of non-skilled workers employed by the government service contractors as a matter of great concern to the government. The Inter-Bureau Department's working group set up by the Secretary of Labor and Welfare exploring options to improve the government outsourcing system with a view to enhancing the protection of reasonable employment terms and conditions, as well as the labor benefits of these non-skilled employees. It is expected that the working group will complete the review within this year. I'll provide the necessary financial support having regard to the outcome of the review. And to effect the abolition of the MPF offsetting arrangement, the government is striving to put forth as soon as possible a proposal which is more acceptable to both employers and employees and will consult major stakeholders. The government has clearly indicated its willingness to increase its financial commitment, and I will set aside $15 billion for these measures. President, I would like to talk about tax burdens. We are working towards the implementation of two-tiered profit tax rate system. To alleviate the tax burden on salary earners, I propose to implement the following measures starting from the year of assessment 2018-19. A. Widening the tax bands for salary tax from the current $45,000 to $50,000, increasing the number of tax bands from 4 to 5, and adjusting the marginal tax rates to 2%, 6%, 10%, 14%, and 17% respectively. These measures will reduce the tax burden of 1.34 taxpayers and reduce tax revenue by $4.09 billion a year. B. Increasing the basic and additional child allowances from the current $100,000 to $120,000. This will benefit 335,000 taxpayers and reduce tax revenue by $1.13 billion a year. C. Increasing the allowances for maintaining a dependent parent or grandparent. This will benefit about 607,000 taxpayers and reduce tax revenues by about $580 million a year. I will make the following three adjustments. 1. Increasing the allowance for maintaining a dependent parent or grandparent age 60 or above from the current $46,000 to $50,000. The same increase applies to the additional allowance for taxpayers residing with parents or grandparents continuously throughout the year. 2. Increasing the allowance for maintaining a dependent parent or grandparent aged between 55 or 59 from the current $23,000 to $25,000. The same increase applies to the additional allowance for taxpayers residing with parents or grandparents continuously throughout the year. And 3. Raising the deduction ceiling for elderly residential care expenses from the current $93,000 to $100,000 for taxpayers whose parents or grandparents are admitted to residential care homes. And I will also introduce a person disability allowance for eligible taxpayers at a rate on par with the current disabled dependent allowance of $75,000. This will reduce tax revenue by about $450 million a year. As for the proposed tax deduction for the premium of voluntary health insurance scheme mentioned earlier, it will reduce tax revenue by around $800 million a year. Subject to the passage of the relevant legislative amendment by the LegCo, I hope that the measure will be implemented from the following year of assessment. At present, if both husband and wife have income accessible to tax and wish to elect for a personal assessment, they must jointly make an election. I propose to relax its requirements starting from the year of assessment 2018-19 by allowing the husband and wife the option to decide whether to elect for a personal assessment, thereby providing greater flexibility to taxpayers. The relaxation will entail amendments to the Inland Revenue Ordinance. President, having regard to our substantial fiscal surplus this year, I will introduce the following measures to share the fruits of our economic success with the community. A. Reducing salary tax and tax under personal assessment for 2017-18 by 75%, subject to a ceiling of $30,000. The reduction will be reflected in the final tax payable for 2017-18. This will benefit 1.8 million taxpayers and reduce tax revenue by $22.6 billion. B. Reducing profit tax for 2017-18 by 75%, subject to ceiling to $30,000. The reduction will be reflected in the final tax payable for 2017-18. This will benefit 142,000 taxpayers and reduce tax revenues by $2.9 billion. C. Waiving rates for the 4 quarters of 2018-19, subject to a ceiling of $2,500 per quarter for each rateable property. This proposal is estimated to benefit 3.25 million properties and reduce government revenue by $17.8 billion. D. providing an extra allowance to Social Security recipients equal to 2 months of the standard rate comprehensive Social Security assistance payments, old age allowance, OALA, or disability allowance. This will involve additional expenditure of about $7 billion. Similar arrangements will apply to recipients of low-income working family allowance and work incentive transport subsidy, involve additional expenditure of about $379 million. Moreover, I will invite the CCF to consider providing short-term relief for low-income households not living in public housing and not receiving CSSA, commonly known as the N-have-not households. E. Providing a one-off grant of $2,000 to each student in need to support learning, involving an expenditure of about $740 million. And F. Paying the examination fees for candidates sitting for the 2019 Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education examination, involving expenditure of about $180 million. And next, on the estimates for 2018-19 and the medium-range forecast. The major policy initiatives announced by the Chief Executive in her policy address involving an operating expenditure of $40 billion and a capital expenditure of $23.5 billion. I will ensure that adequate resources are provided to fully support the launch of these initiatives. Total government revenue for 2018-19 is estimated to be $604.5 billion, of which earnings and profit tax is estimated at $218.4 billion. The revenue from land premium is estimated to be $121 billion, while that from stamp duty is estimated to be $100 billion. The overall expenditure of the government for 2018-19 estimated to be $557.9 billion, an increase of 17.6% compared to the revised estimate for 2017-18. Operating expenditure for 2018-19 is estimated to be at $441.5 billion, and year-on-year increase of 18.4% or $68.6 billion. Recurrent expenditure, which account for over 90% of operating expenditure, will reach $406.5 billion, and year-on-year increase of 11.8% or $42.8 billion. In 2018-19, the estimated recurrent expenditure on education, social welfare, and healthcare accounts for about 60% of government recurrent expenditure, exceeding $230 billion in total. Recurrent expenditure in these three areas record a cumulative increase of 42.8% over the past 5 years. The government will increase manpower to support the implementation of various new policies and initiatives and ease the work pressure on civil servants. In 2018-19, the civil service establishment is expected to expand by 6,700 posts to 188,451. This represents a year-on-year increase of about 3.7%, the highest since reunification. Moreover, I will allocate a one-off provision to Policy Bureau in 2018-19, equivalent to 3% of the recurrent non-personal emoluments portion of their envelopes, to allow for greater operational flexibility in coping with price adjustments, implementing new initiatives of a smaller scale, or making service improvement. Taking all this into account, I forecast a surplus of $46.6 billion in the consolidated accounts in the coming year. Fiscal reserves are estimated to be at $1,138.6 billion by the end of March 2019, equivalent to 40.3% of GDP. For the medium term, the average growth rate is forecast to be 3% per annum in real terms from 2019 to 2022, slightly higher than the trend growth rate of 2.7% over the past decade, and the underlying inflation rate expected to average 2.5% per annum. The medium-term economic forecast has taken into account the impact of the aging population on economic growth, with the assumption that there are no severe external shocks during the period. That said, as the complicated and volatile political and economic climate around the world may cause fluctuations in the financial markets and affect Hong Kong asset prices and economic sentiments. We must remain vigilant. The medium-range forecast projects, mainly from a macro perspective, the government expenditures requirements from 2019-20 to 2022 to 23. It is noteworthy that the annual expenditure on infrastructure project will soon exceed $100 billion. But this projection has not fully reflected the expenditure that may be incurred by all the land development, highway, and railway projects under planning. Besides, over the medium term from 2019-2020 to 2022-23, growth of the recurring government expenditure is estimated to range between 6.1% and 9.7% per annum, consistently higher than the average annual nominal economic growth of 5% over the same period. Regarding revenue, the land premium estimate for 2018-19 mainly makes reference to the land sale program and the land supply target of the coming year. From 2019-20 onwards, the medium-range forecast on land premium is based on the average proportion of land revenue to GDP over the past decade, which is 3.6% of GDP. I will also assume that the growth rate of revenues from property tax and other taxes will be similar to the economic growth rate in the next few years. Based on the above assumptions, I forecast an annual surplus in the operating account for the coming 5 financial years, but a small deficit will surface in the capital account in 2021-22. Fiscal reserves are estimated at $1,222.6 billion by the end of March 2023, representing 35.6% of GDP, or equivalent to 21 months of government expenditure. Taking all this into account, the government will have an overall surplus in the next 5 years. The above forecast has not taken into account the tax rebate and relief measures that the government may implement from 2019-20 to 2022 to 23. Mr. President, in planning and preparing for this budget, I've been wrestling with what kind of budget would enable Hong Kong to forge ahead and make it a better place to live and work in. In formulating the initiatives in this budget, I have taken into account the views received from different stakeholders and members of the public whom I consulted. The budget is not a panacea for all our problems, but I'm deeply grateful for the many people who devote themselves to the betterment of our home, Hong Kong. Their devotion has bolstered my confidence in the future. Our country's economic development has entered a new phase. This, coupled with the ever-changing global economic landscape, has created a very favorable external environment for Hong Kong. If we can capitalize on the opportunities, the wind beneath our wings will bear Hong Kong far and high. On the economic front, the current term government is ready to think out of the box and act proactively to open up new horizons for Hong Kong. To improve people's livelihood, we are resolute in devoting resources and will spare no effort in solving problems. Over the years, Hong Kong has weathered many storms and always emerged stronger through changes. What remain unchanged are our commitment to diversity and openness, our pursuit of fairness and justice, and our aspirations for a happy life. I strongly believe this, as long as we embrace hope, find the right direction, and steel our resolve, we will be able to brave the wind and the billows to turn our dreams into reality. Thank you, Mr. President.
I now put a question to you, and that is, the Appropriation Bill 2016 be read the second time. According to the rules of procedure, the second reading debate is adjourned, and estimates are referred to the Finance Committee for examination before the debate on the bill resumes. Members' motion. Proposed resolution.